I'm Eric Barden.
I'm Amy Barden.
Welcome to another episode of Bombardened. Today we are talking with Lisa Daugaard, a stalwart from Seattle politics and has led. Can you lead?
It's PDA, Purpose, Dignity, Action.
Well,
is the organization.
We're going to talk about lead, though.
Yeah, we're going to talk about lead.
Purpose, dignity, and action.
Yeah.
That's nice. That sounds good.
It is good.
What does it do?
Yeah, so this is one of the major nonprofit partners for me. One of the most significant is actually almost like a consortium of teams in the city. And really, Lisa is the principal designer of diversion as we think about it. Meaning, if somebody is arrested and we think that this is probably substance use, mental health, something like that, can we hand off to somebody else, right? Can we help people navigate not necessarily through the justice system, but around it and get a better result. So it was really groundbreaking work. This is, 2010, 11, 12, 13. Seattle was the home. It's all over, it's international now. The LEAD framework is all over the country. And it's not always applied in exactly the same way. I might ask her about that. But
I got some things to ask her too.
I'm sure that you do. Yeah. You've been, SPD was you were the test kitchen really for this framework.
And maybe still are.
But LEAD also, again, out of that, one of the qualities she has that I admire is that she does iterate. It's like, okay, we understand a new thing or we've got a different type of drug. What do we do now? And so in 2020, that's when CoLEAD, which is Emergency Stabilization Housing, that asset, and that team run by Nicole Alexander, another person we've interviewed, that was added on because they realized, okay, well, we can case manage someone as well as possible, but if they're under this bridge, we don't know that we're going to see the directional improvement, and we're probably not going to see the reduction in criminal activity that we want to see. And so she's really fun to talk to for me. I mean, we just talk really fast and over each other most of the time. But
well, I really look forward to delving into how do we know if and when LEAD is working? How do we measure that? What the metrics are? So, from a law enforcement perspective, a lot of times the officers see the same person out there that they just referred to LEAD day after day after day after day and wonder, is anything happening? Yeah. So this should be a fantastic conversation.
Yep.
I look forward to it.
It's going to be a long one, I predict.
You do?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk to Lisa. Well, welcome, Lisa.
It's great.
Glad to have you here.
To be here.
Yeah.
I am a fan, so.
Well, I am a reciprocal fan.
I was about to say you're our only fan, but
I know that's not true.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. The number of people who have recommended this podcast to me is enormous.
Yeah.
Only a few of whom have been guests.
Well, good. That's good to hear.
That's good. It's funny, the genesis really was that people kept asking us, and sometimes journalists, like, basically, do you get along really?
What do you talk about
at home? And people, I think again, I was surprised the press didn't pick it up, like, Cares in Bed with SPD would have been an awesome headline. But it's interesting. A lot of the journalists told me, they were like, we thought it was kind of sweet. It's like, that's your personal life. It's fine. But people were always assumed that we wouldn't agree on anything and that we must fight like cats and dogs, which is only partially true. So it's been fun and he is my favorite person to talk to because we have very, very different perspectives. Yeah.
Finding common ground out of different starting points.
Yeah. That's exactly how I describe it, is that we come at things from very different perspectives, but we often find a lot of common ground.
Well, you listen to one another, which is such a valuable
here's an idea.
Model.
Yeah, what's a crazy idea?
It's novel, isn't it? Yeah, that's
very
interesting.
timely.
So let's go real quick. It was funny when I came back to Seattle and came into this role, and people were talking about, like, trying to explain to me who you were and what LEAD is, and I was like, I know what that is. Everybody knows what that is, and I've lived in different states, but I didn't realize that I happened to be here sort of ground level as it was being rolled out, and I was in the nonprofit space, so that's probably why I had a heightened awareness. But will you just run down real quick, that origin story of Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion? I always think everybody knows the acronym, but
yeah. Sure. So it actually came out. So LEAD is a collaborative partnership between law enforcement, really skilled case managers, social workers, prosecutors, and kind of like the public safety customers, if you will, so businesses and neighborhoods, to create a pathway for people who commit crimes chronically. So in distinct from some of your work, it's not just crisis. Obviously our people are often in crisis, but when they're not in crisis, they're also chronically in a situation where they're engaged in low-level illegal behavior, but it's related to behavioral health problems or poverty. And so this is creating a response to those problems because they are problems, they need a response, but they typically don't respond well to jail and prosecution. So instead, creating a comprehensive strategy for responding to those issues that understands like it's not a moment in time, it's kind of an ongoing situation. So the solution has to have ongoing cooperation between law enforcement and the case managers especially, but also prosecutors because they have multiple cases with these individuals and the officers see people day in, day out, week in, week out. So what we need is like a way to have a hub for that conversation. Like, what's the plan for this person? Remind me, are they going somewhere next week or have they dropped out of contact? Because that then drives a different response from police. So it's collaboration, but it came out of adversarial strife. And that's really the kind of the interesting thing about the origin. I, at the time, was a public defender. We had a long running litigation that it was not a civil lawsuit, but motion to dismiss a group of criminal cases. They were felonies at the time, low-level drug delivery cases. And our theory, the motion to dismiss, was based on an allegation that drug enforcement was racially discriminatory, though not because of the choice of anyone involved. And that was like a real sore spot with SPD at the time. They really felt, everybody involved really felt like we were accusing them individually or those involved of racism. And that's not what we were saying. We were saying, in Seattle, the drug economy is dominated by white people. Seattle is dominated by white people and drug activity is dominated by white people. But almost everybody being caught up in enforcement was Black. And the question was kind of like, indeed, after years of working on this and years of talking to people in SPD, in the end, we were like, nobody exactly knows why, but they know that that is true. And what evolved out of what started out as a very contentious accusation, if you will, that, some people in SPD still say that like we accused. We're like,
I actually haven't heard that.
Oh, it's really, there was a lot of animosity and bad feelings at the time, but at the end of that work, kind of reached a point where everybody was like, you know what? Regardless of whether we agree on why this is happening, we agree that it is happening. And we definitely also agree that it's not very effective. Like, we could do something different. And for different reasons, there was an interest in that. And the idea of police-led pre-booking diversion came out of that very tense and
out of the debate.
Contentious struggle, legal struggle.
Was this like 2009, 2010 that this conversation is starting?
That's when it ended. It actually started in 2001.
Oh, is that right?
Going back
a
long way.
Were you at all engaged in that debate in the, before LEAD was really created, the product or the philosophy?
I was, at that time, I was in the intel world, and it really didn't.
So you weren't in narcotics
because this was low level stuff. Really patrol.
Well, even when I was in narcotics, the stuff that Lisa's talking about is primarily street level dealers, and we didn't really spend a lot. That wasn't our thing. We were doing, the warehousers and the ounce and multi-ounce dealers to the kilo dealers. So it was a different deal, and those were heavily represented by the Hispanic community because the cartels are the ones bringing the dope in. So, that was the reasoning but those people were not the people that.
They were not our client group.
Yeah. So when I was, especially for 6 months, just asking a million questions. I mean, I'm still like that, but I was trying to stay on the front lines as much as possible to illuminate what the perceptions were as well. What are the assumptions in this city right now? I knew that we had either some policy issues or we weren't applying the policy, based on results. And I did learn about fentanyl real quick, right? And I learned just, through that 911 lens about the apparent corollary between substance use and all the crimes, which I never knew. I never knew. I think I still had this very antiquated idea that, no, there's some healthy people that just go do crimes. And no, you keep hearing me say that now. I'm like, no, it's always going to be mental health or behavioral health, or that's not a healthy brain. But I spent some time in roll calls, would have been in 23, talking about diversion, and that, of course, diversion can work. However, right, it's like it has to be implemented properly, and we do have different drugs right now. And so the time to service, right, for some folks, it has to be intake on demand or in very short order, or we need to stay with you until. And that's what people in recovery were telling me too. And so I want to ask you about that. What is different when you think about 2010? What needs to be different in 2025 for us to be successful besides adequate investment?
Okay, a few thoughts. Number one, fentanyl is unique, and it changed the behavior of people on the street, the sequence of illegal activity.
Yeah,
ratcheted up because you're buying more frequently, you're using more frequently, and I will also say it didn't fundamentally change the toolkit that we need.
Right.
Lead, when lead started, the dominant drugs, the dominant drug was heroin. There was also crack use still in the mix. And midway through kind of the history of lead, methamphetamine became much more prominent. Each of these, if you didn't know what was coming next, it was very serious. So I think that there's a little bit of sort of like rosy historical.
Remember the sweet meth days?
I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's even more complicated doesn't change the fact that it was bad then. And what is interesting to me is that when we started LEAD, there was really nothing for our for that population. It was that group of people was constantly being ordered by courts to do things that were both not accessible to them, and if they were not effective for them. And there was just really nothing out there. So we substituted for that something good, which was long-term case management. And that was revolutionary. It was like orders of magnitude better and different than what had come before. And it took a few years of doing that, and the evaluation of LEAD, which was very rigorous. There was a control group. It was a randomized control trial done by the University of Washington, funded by the Arnold Foundation. And it found really incredible impacts, a big reduction in crime compared to the control group, huge reduction in prison admissions and jail stays and felony filings compared to the control group, and improvement in shelter, housing, and lawful income within the group. But so that was great. People had a big press conference. Congratulations. It worked. Yeah. And I do want to pause to say those evaluation findings were only made possible by the law enforcement officers who kept the data. They were really like, we'll try this and we're going to evaluate it. And so they were like very committed to data integrity, because honestly, most of them thought it was not going to work. Yeah. And they wanted quoting a lieutenant at the time, Tom Yoon, who was like, when this fails, he ended up being, he was an incredible implementer of LEAD, but he was very skeptical as well. He was like, if and when this fails, it won't be because of us. It won't be because we didn't try it, and it won't be because we didn't document it. So then when the data showed, it was really much, and of course they meanwhile saw.
So this was data, what year was this study that you're talking about?
The data were kept from the beginning, 2011 through 2014, and then analyzed in 2015 and 2016, and then published subsequently to that. So it was a long exposure, and it really looked rigorously at, after we'd been working with people for a while, and then looking for a while after, not quick turnaround impacts. And it was just so much better. But so that was because we were comparing what we were doing to what was happening otherwise, the system as usual. And at that time, the system as usual was happening. There were a lot of arrests. There were a lot of people. We were doing lead in Belltown, one neighborhood, and the whole rest of the city was still having a regular experience of people going into the criminal system. So what was interesting is that even though compared to what was happening in the rest of the city, which was just people were being arrested, booked, prosecuted as normal, what we were producing was a much better outcome. And it was still not good. And I think that it took us a few years to think about, maybe that's not the right question. Like doing better than almost like breaking people on purpose is maybe the wrong threshold. And so by 2018, 2019, number one, the system as usual was no longer operating the way that it had been when we started. The city attorney's office was mainly characterized by like what they weren't filing. There was not a positive agenda of law enforcement strategy. And there was, like officers were completely on board. Like, the old way did not produce good results, but we weren't doing, this case management alone was producing, better, but still insufficient results to create a feeling in neighborhoods of like, oh, we've solved this problem. Like we definitely had not solved the problem just because we were doing better than what had happened before. So out of that came, the last 7 years of our work, which is like, we need to evolve the intervention. And this is why I say, even before fentanyl, it was clear that like, we need more tools to accomplish the mission, if you will. The mission isn't just to like do better than what was happening 20 years ago. It's to really meet people's needs and reduce, get to the point where neighborhoods are, it's, you look out on the street and
everybody's goal is
fine.
When folks are disrupting public safety and public order, that we get them the help that they need, the services that they need to get them stabilized so they become contributing members of society. That's everybody's goal.
Yep.
And there's, I think, a rule for all of these different elements within that. So I'm going to look forward to the rest of this conversation when we dive into the details, because I think if you ask officers today, I'm not sure there's a lot of confidence that they continue to see the same people over and over and over again on the street and relay people and divert folks into lead. So you've talked about like the studies earlier that showed some success. You've talked about a profound realization that we still can do better. We can do better. What does success look like for you? What would we be doing, and how would we measure it if we were to meet this aspirational success?
That is such a great question. I'm going to put a pin in it for 1 second, just because I don't want to lose this one important point that your comment made me think about. So in the when LEAD was really running as it's meant to, and this is before 2020. In 2020, things really broke. And
what happened in 2020? Did something happen in 2020?
Multiple things happened in 2020, but let me explain how it was before then to get a sense of how back in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. Officers were not wondering what happened with people because LEAD is built around, it's not, officer makes a referral. That is not the end of it. It's the beginning, right? And it is expected that there's going to be a very long arc of work, recovery. It's nonlinear. People make progress, then they almost have like a fear, sometimes a fear of success. And there's some testing of like, I'm a person who screws up. If I screw up, are you going to give up on me? And so there's a little screwing up, and then the person...
It's like kids in the foster care system. It's just
so
like that.
Understanding that environment, we knew, right, that it was going to be critical for officers not to wonder, like, I made a referral, but they're still out here. Is anything happening?
Mm-hmm.
Are people doing their job? Mm-hmm. Is it going to work? So we built into the model ongoing consultation, these operational work groups, which were meetings between the officers on the street, frontline line officers, the case managers, neighborhood leaders, all of whom talked about how's that person doing. And, as the program grew, you couldn't talk about everybody every 2 weeks because there's just too many people. So we started focusing on the people who are still presenting ongoing problems. And it was just a case conferencing strategy of like, well, what? Yeah. And the rule is it's not immunity, right? And it's not hands off. It's what can each of the players in this around this table do within the zone of their authority to best support behavior change. So sometimes that is, I can see that he's committing low-level crimes and there's some warrants, but tomorrow he is about to move into housing for the first time in 18 years. So I'm not going to serve this warrant from, 3 states over for a shoplift versus, he's been given every opportunity. The case manager is killing themselves and the person is just defiantly uninterested in making any change. And that guy's going to jail. And so it's all discretionary, but how to use that discretion. It wasn't like a roulette wheel of randomness. It was like on purpose, pursuant to a plan that everyone was cooperating on.
And I will say, Lisa, I hear officers and most folks who are in police leadership now describe that season. And I can tell to them it was like this golden season.
Golden era.
It really meant a lot to people because I think that without that transparency and people, that's why I talk about drug diversion court. I just like it when the person's best interests are central.
Right.
And when we acknowledge that sometimes that we do still need accountability.
Right.
Right. And if we're failing the person, I think there was so much confidence in SPD around lead at that time. Mm-hmm. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. But it's because officers had a ton of information about what was happening and they knew the work that was going in. I mean, at the beginning, officers were like, to the case managers, right? I don't think you really know what's going on out there. And of course, the case managers were mainly people with lived experience. They knew full well they had been arrested, But what we learned, right, was that it was necessary for the case managers to go out with the officers, walk the same sidewalks at the same time and find that, we see this the same. Mm-hmm. And ultimately what, created that bond and that sense of mutuality is that each partner needed the reinforcement of the other, right? Yeah. And so
that's when it works.
And so 2020 broke that. And just to say that for multiple, even before George Floyd was murdered, COVID had caused a retreat of frontline officers from engagement with public order offenses. And so, we were still there. We didn't like cut ties with the police or anything, of course, because that would be antithetical to our values.
The design,
So we were still at the table, but police could not be at that table for structural reasons. And then compound that with the ideological sort of like wave that came where and I don't know how well this is really understood in SPD, and I know how much trauma everyone that I know in law enforcement went through and is still carrying from that time. On our end, the world, like all of our partners and allies in the community, were circulating letters demanding to cut ties with police. And we were virtually the only social service providers who did not sign on to that stuff. Yeah. And we were therefore marginalized from the policy conversations about the way forward.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So,
I didn't know that.
No, lead was forgotten like that.
Because of that affiliation.
Yes.
Wow. That is interesting.
It was a weird time where literally my closest friends, family members, like the wave of anti-police sentiment was really, it was like being in a movie. It was like this reality is flipped on its head here.
Yeah, it must have been very disorienting.
It was
at this
very
point, you're
bizarre.
You're 33 years in. Everybody's, been by your side for 33 years and then not.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think there's always been a healthy scrutiny of police, and particularly in Seattle. But it went from a healthy scrutiny to a disdain that was just pervasive. It was absolutely fascinating. And I was leading cops that were literally going out. I mean, we never didn't go to work. We never didn't contact people. We didn't, and it was it was unknown the risks that we were taking, but no cops, didn't show up that worked for me. And so it was just a really weird time where we're like, wait, we're the only ones out here working, and yet we're still like the horrible people.
Many people have described to me. So again, I landed 911 early 23, and I missed all of this, right? It was like a headline, and that I didn't pay any attention to. But obviously 911 had been part of SPD, and that was the first thing I learned. They said it was so weird, Amy, because people would say, all cops are bad, F the police, and then call 911 asking for police in the next breath. And it very stressful and disorienting. And I am really glad that I arrived at the moment I did, because I think that had largely dissipated. I think we were in a much more pragmatic space, because we did have some of the worst escalating violent crime in the country, 2020 to 2023. Yep. And so I was real quick to just look at the actual results and then start to talk about those calls for service, what's coming in. And you have watched me evolve in my thinking. But I did know from the jump, these are public health calls. I could see that corollary. I did know something about juvenile justice. And we're not intervening in a way that is going to break the cycle. And so I have been dying to work with you. I mean, I really have. It is something that I have been asserting, because until you get the continuum all coordinated, where we understand that sometimes it's going to be, police and fire and mental health all needed on the same call, and first responders need to quickly hand off to a system that is prepared to support that person into change.
The next day.
That's right.
The long-term care piece is so rarely built in, and that's our sweet spot.
Yep.
That's really, it's long-term care, but it's also that ongoing coordination and understanding. We have to share information, and we have to do that in a framework that will not cause participants and case managers to pull back from the collaboration because it blows up in their face. And it's complicated to set that up, but that's the thing that LEAD really succeeded in establishing before. In 2020, there was really, there were many new faces and voices in a conversation that were not read into, how it was, but also how much progress we had made, and also what it took to achieve that. Yeah. And there's an oversimplification of how easy it is to come up with an alternative plan. Yeah, I agree. It couldn't be harder. It couldn't be more complicated. And you have occupied one of the, ways in which it's super complicated. And for us, part of it is objectively dangerous to do the work that our teams do if they are not super skilled, super cognizant of the reality out there. And we found that, the space in 2020 was flooded with a lot of people who were very idealistic. Yeah. And I know that is kind of an insult, but I mean it in a good way. People really wanted it to be the case that other forces could just move into the space and meet people's needs. Yeah. But it's so much more difficult, dangerous, expensive. Yeah. And ultimately, you get a few conversations in, realize, this guy is an asshole. Yeah. He's abusive. Yeah. He uses racialized slurs. It's not my job to put up with that, and I'm done. Well, yes.
I love Brandy Flood. Yeah. The first time I talked to her, she just cracked me up. She was just like, I know he's a pimp. She's just so real. Yeah.
In Chop Chaz, just to give you an example. So, there were a lot of hashtags, we got us, and I'm like, do we know?
Do we?
So
that experiment failed.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it obviously failed in spectacular and terrible, violent ways that some of the police partners that I have maintained close ties to all throughout. We're super individually, we're called to respond, super traumatized by, and I just will never forget what their voices sounded like when they were watching what was unfolding and what they were not able to do. But at a lower level, too, you had all these kind of, sort of mutual aid organizations in absolute good intentions, wanting to respond to people's needs. And then people with very profound needs flooded the space. Yeah. And very rapidly, those organizations were like, we need help.
Yeah.
So they would call us. And we, of course, had staff who could engage with that population. But so we're like, okay, yeah, we can respond. But ultimately, we were not asked to because of the police, because of the cooperate with police. Yeah. Wow. And so that, anyway.
It's so wild. I mean, one of my favorite people in the city is Z. Andrignas, who, has been with police, that co-responder unit on the clinical side since, I think, 2016. And it's been explained to me by anyone who was in that, Susie Kroll's another one, in that co-response space. They said they lost friends. Because again, in the social work world, it was like, you are in bed with the devil, and it was, I'm very much admire people who held the line, kept their wits about them and just proceeded, because it did, I think, largely pass.
Yeah. We were reflecting on that time this morning in a meeting with our case management partners, and there was just somebody was promoted, and we were sort of celebrating that they had stuck it out, and Brandy Flood was reminding me and colleagues that 5 years ago we were wondering, is LEAD over? Do we need it anymore? Yeah. Is there even a space for this? And I just really want to commend a number of people in the LEAD universe who are, particularly Black women who had deep social pressures to not persist with this lane of work.
Yeah.
And who are like, we will need this. Police will be back in this space.
Yeah.
And there will not be some sort of miraculous, substitute public safety system that just, that we arrive at overnight. And we're going to need to be here. And they just, people are, many of my colleagues really endured several years of loss in relationship terms because of knowing that. And I do feel like we have come through. And I think a lot of the people who, signed on to the cut ties letters at the time now know that was a mistake and regret it. And so there was a lot of harm done. And of course, they took those stances also in response to harm. So we are in maybe an opportunity kind of after 5 years to relaunch some approches with a lot of lessons learned. And I hope so anyway.
And
so
I hope
getting back to what now that that's a great sort of contextual timeline of development, but here we are in 2025. How should we define success now? What does success look like in this relaunch?
Basically, because it is a little bit of a redesign right now and a relaunch. And so how perfect world, again, we assume all the investment is there that is ever needed. How do we do it? And
really,
to what end?
I mean, that's easy. If we had the resources,
I have an agenda here.
If we had the resources we need, this is actually not that hard.
Yeah.
We do have to deal with structurally, this country has very broken systems of care and support for people with low income and without a lifelong job where you definitely maintain insurance and
retire with a pension.
But the stuff that we can engineer below that level of structure, structural economic system stuff, we know what works, which is, and this is something that we innovated starting in 2020, that people need more than street-based case management. We're like, we can case manage people in a park living in a tent
forever
for the next several years. But what are we really accomplishing? So we took the leap. We were able to take the leap because momentarily there were resources with COVID relief funding. So we built the co-lead shelter program that you both have visited. Which
Nicole
was
Alexander.
Well, let's put let's experiment with like what would happen if we offered non-congregate shelter with 24/7 supports, a safety team to make sure that it was, like not problematic in the neighborhood where these shelters were sited. And we could provide intensive case management, not out there wandering around trying to find our clients, but like multiple times a day. What would happen? And would people come? And what turned out to be true is, everyone will come. And I think, honestly, I don't think people knew that until there was, before 2020, awareness that like tiny homes were popular, the navigation center was popular, but for whom? And so we go to an encampment with a lot of crazy stuff happening. So low, not the shallow end of the pool, really people who are chronically unsheltered, long criminal history, current illegal activity, participation in the illicit economy, selling stolen property, selling drugs, selling sex, and drug use, but not just drug use. I think too often it's simplified that like drug use is the thing. Like it's nested in a much more complex suite of behaviors and situations. So pretty hard to like program for that, population. And that population was generally not welcome in shelters. If they went in, they would get kicked out almost immediately. So like, if we offer our approach, will people say yes? 95% of people said yes. And they're like, well, can we keep people and have it be safe? So we had to, here are our rules, figure out how to enforce those rules, figure out how to explain those rules to people. And people stayed. And then could we navigate people to permanent housing? Yes, at a high rate when we had access to permanent housing. But how well did they do in permanent housing? Initially, not super well. So then we built an aftercare team that follows them into permanent housing and makes sure that they have the same level of support that we have in co-lead. So at this point, I think we know that like people need a lot more than any of our existing systems offer. But when you can provide that, people will voluntarily engage. We don't lose very many people. There is a small cohort who will not engage, or if they do, their behaviors are still too dangerous for us to safely care for them. And those are the people who either are customers for the criminal legal system, or in a classic sense, or for civil commitment. But those are very small.
That's a very small. I know. I'm always trying to stress that. I think that's what I love being on the front lines, because that first encounter with Nicole, it just basically validated what I thought that I knew, what I had observed in other circumstances. But I kept hearing how, the population's so different now. And the myths I arrived to is like, everyone's service resistant. Nobody, people kept saying, no, folks just want to be homeless. And I was like, really? Because that's antithetical to everything I know about the brain and human behavior. And, it turned out that I was right. And what Nicole was doing, I'm so entertained by how simple and sort of analog that process is, but it's human-centered. And I keep trying to translate to people. Mostly I'm saying to folks, just go out, just go walk with people. And community members, well-intended, sometimes say, well, Amy, I asked them if they needed help. And they said no. And I was like, he doesn't know you. He doesn't know you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You need to invest a little bit more and build a little bit of trust. And it doesn't have to be, I think people think that, again, what you represent is like, just leave people where they are, right? Or lead for life. Like there's no real intention to ever break these cycles. And that is just not what I'm seeing on the front lines.
No, I mean, lead is about the exact opposite.
So I was right. It is a long conversation.
It is. It's one we're going to break up into 2 shows. So come back and see episode 2.
The Bombardened podcast is a Barden Squared production. Executive producers are Eric Barden and Amy Barden, and video and audio production of the Bombardened podcast is by Thread Theory Creative.